The most powerful conference in college football just said something that used to stay behind closed doors. At Southeastern Conference Media Days, Commissioner Greg Sankey was asked whether conversations about potentially separating from the NCAA were real. His answer was direct. They are real. That does not mean the Southeastern Conference has voted to leave. It does not mean an exit date exists. It does not mean 16 schools have agreed on a replacement league, a new championship, or a finished set of rules. But it does mean the warning can no longer be dismissed as message board fantasy or outside speculation. The commissioner of the Southeastern Conference publicly confirmed that people inside the room have discussed whether college sports may need something significantly different. And the most important part of the story is not the dramatic possibility of a breakaway by itself. It is the reason that possibility is now being discussed openly. Sankey described a level of frustration with the system around the conference. He also said he still sees meaning and value in a national organization, provided that organization can function in a healthy way. Those two ideas can exist together. The Southeastern Conference can prefer one national system, while also questioning whether the current version is capable of producing rules that powerful conferences believe they can actually follow, enforce, and trust. That creates the central question. Is the Southeastern Conference preparing to leave the NCAA, or is it warning that remaining inside the NCAA is no longer unconditional? To answer that honestly, we have to separate four different things that are being blended together in the headlines. Real frustration is not the same as real capability. Real capability is not the same as active preparation. And active preparation would still not be the same as an imminent departure. Right now, the public evidence strongly supports the first category. The frustration is real. The evidence for a completed exit structure is not. That distinction matters because college football does not operate as a simple collection of teams that can change a logo, sign a new television agreement, and move on. The NCAA structure touches eligibility, transfers, championships, enforcement, athlete protections, academic responsibilities, dispute resolution, and dozens of sports that never receive the attention or revenue of football. So before asking whether the Southeastern Conference could leave, we need to understand what is making powerful leaders consider the question at all. The first problem is control. The Southeastern Conference believes it has repeatedly imposed standards on itself that were stricter than standards used elsewhere. Sankey pointed toward past academic eligibility rules and transfer restrictions as examples of a league choosing to regulate itself. That creates resentment when a conference accepts tighter limits, but believes the national structure cannot consistently enforce comparable expectations across the rest of the country. The second problem is speed. College sports is changing faster than the national rulemaking system can respond. Revenue sharing, name, image, and likeness compensation, transfer movement, eligibility lawsuits, agent conduct, athlete employment questions, and state laws are all moving at the same time. A rule created today can be challenged tomorrow, interpreted differently in another state, or limited by a court before schools have adjusted to the first version. The third problem is legal exposure. The Southeastern Conference and the Big Ten have both said they support a sustainable national framework. They have also said the current Protect College Sports Act leaves major concerns unresolved. Their objections include weak protection against the patchwork of state laws, uncertainty around enforceable national rules, the possibility of additional litigation, and changes that could affect how direct revenue sharing reaches athletes. That is not a rejection of national standards. It is an argument over whether the proposed standards would actually stabilize the system, and that leads to the fourth problem: trust. A national organization only works when members believe the same rules apply, the enforcement process is credible, and major decisions are not constantly overturned by the next lawsuit, state law, political negotiation, or conference power struggle. The public separation conversation is a sign that this trust is weakening, but abstract governance can feel distant from Saturday football. The 9-game Southeastern Conference schedule shows how the same frustration reaches the field. The conference has moved toward a more demanding league schedule that creates more major matchups, more valuable television inventory, and fewer easy Saturdays. It also creates another guaranteed conference loss every time 2 league teams play, Across an entire conference season, those losses do not disappear. They are distributed through the standings. That matters because the college football playoff still judges teams through records, schedules, rankings, conference results, and committee interpretation. A conference can argue that its fourth-place team faced a brutal path. A selection committee can still look at the number in the loss column and choose a team from another league with one fewer defeat. Missouri coach Eli Drinkwitz made the frustration public at media days. His point was not simply that Southeastern Conference coaches are afraid of hard games. The deeper concern is that coaches believed a larger playoff would create more room for teams carrying the damage of a stronger conference schedule. The playoff remains at 12 teams for the current season, while 16-team and 24-team structures continue to be debated. That leaves the Southeastern Conference taking on additional schedule risk before it knows how that risk will be rewarded. Imagine two teams competing for one of the final playoff spots. One finishes 9-3 after playing 9 conference games inside the Southeastern Conference. The other finishes 10-2 after a path with fewer high-level conference matchups or greater flexibility outside the league. The question becomes whether the committee rewards the stronger schedule or protects the cleaner record. There is no formula strong enough to remove the human debate, and that is exactly why scheduling becomes a governance issue. The Southeastern Conference can control its own format. It cannot fully control how the playoff evaluates the consequences. Sankey has also questioned whether decision-makers fully understand the rigor of competing in his league. That concern connects the schedule dispute to the broader breakaway discussion. The conference is not only asking for more power because it makes more money. It is asking whether national systems can accurately measure, regulate, and reward the choices the league makes for itself. Still, frustration does not produce an easy exit. The NCAA is often discussed as though it is one office that writes unpopular rules. In practice, membership provides a large infrastructure that schools use every day. There are eligibility processes, there are championship systems, there are enforcement procedures, there are sport committees, health and safety frameworks, academic standards, insurance relationships, officiating structures, and administrative services across the entire athletic department. The NCAA administers more than 90 national championships, and most of them have nothing to do with major college football. That is where the simple breakaway fantasy meets the difficult reality. A football conference might possess the money to operate independently. Its universities still sponsor basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, soccer, track, swimming, gymnastics, tennis, golf, and many other sports. Those athletes still need schedules, eligibility standards, championships, officiating, compliance systems, and a recognized competitive structure. Title IX responsibilities would not disappear because a school left the NCAA. Academic responsibilities would not disappear. Athlete safety responsibilities would not disappear. The cost of supporting those sports would not disappear. In some cases, the complexity could increase because the universities would have to recreate services that membership currently provides. There is also no public evidence of a complete replacement model. Sankey did not announce a new rulebook. He did not reveal a new governing body. He did not identify a championship partner or explain how a football departure would affect every other Southeastern Conference sport. That does not prove internal planning is absent. It means the public evidence stops at serious discussion. And if the Southeastern Conference ever moved beyond discussion, it would have to answer a long list of operational questions. Who creates the rules? Who determines eligibility? Who handles transfer disputes? Who regulates name, image, and likeness activity? Who investigates violations? Who decides punishments? Who administers championships? Who resolves disagreements between schools? Who establishes athlete safety standards? Who negotiates the postseason? Who distributes revenue? And who gives the new champion national legitimacy? The current NCAA model centralizes many of those functions, even when members disagree with how they are performed. An independent structure would either distribute those responsibilities among conferences or create another central organization to replace the one being left. That is the irony at the center of nearly every breakaway proposal. The schools may want to escape a national regulator. To operate at national scale, they may need to build a new national regulator. A Southeastern Conference-only system would also have limits. Its schools could play one another. They could sell valuable media rights. They could create their own championship. But college football draws much of its value from national comparison. Alabama against Ohio State, Georgia against Notre Dame, Texas against Michigan. the Southeastern Conference against the Big Ten, the Atlantic Coast Conference, the Big 12, and the rest of the country. A system that isolates one league could weaken the very national stakes that make its biggest games valuable. That is why most realistic discussions point toward cooperation among multiple major conferences, rather than one league operating alone. The Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference already cooperate on major policy questions. Their joint statement on federal legislation shows shared interest in national transfer standards, clear eligibility rules, athlete protections, and a more stable framework. But cooperation is not the same as agreement on everything. The leagues can differ on playoff size, scheduling models, media strategy, geographic priorities, and how much access other conferences should receive. Building a replacement organization would force those disagreements into the center. It would also require existing contracts to be examined. Media agreements were negotiated under the current competitive structure. Bowl relationships depend on conference membership and postseason expectations. The college football playoff has its own governance and revenue arrangements. School presidents would have to consider whether a departure creates legal, financial, academic, and political consequences beyond football. That makes a breakaway possible in theory, but costly and complicated in practice. It also strengthens the most important counterpoint. The Southeastern Conference may not actually want to leave. Sankey said there is value in a national organization. The conference and the Big Ten continue to negotiate over federal legislation instead of abandoning the process. They have explained what they want changed. They want rules that can operate across state lines. They want clear eligibility and transfer standards. They want protections that reduce instability rather than create new lawsuits. They want athlete benefits and scholarship protections preserved. They want enough flexibility to respond when the environment changes. That behavior looks less like a conference packing its bags and more like a conference telling the current system what it must do to remain acceptable. Of course, that can still function as pressure even when the frustration is sincere. Sankey rejected the idea that the comments were merely leverage, but a statement does not have to be fake to improve a negotiating position. The possibility can be real. The preferred outcome can still be reform. The threat can still change how lawmakers, NCAA leaders, playoff officials, and other conferences respond. That is why the cleanest answer is not that the Southeastern Conference is leaving, and it is not that the entire conversation is theater. It is a serious warning from a conference with enough money and influence to make the warning matter. The next question is what happens if the warning is ignored? A true structural split would reach every level of college football. The Big Ten would immediately face pressure to choose a direction. The Atlantic Coast Conference and Big 12 would have to protect their access, revenue, and national relevance. Group of 5 programs would need to know whether they still have a route to the same championship. Football championship subdivision programs could lose relationships, games, and financial opportunities tied to the current system. Bowl organizations would have to renegotiate their place. Recruiting and transfer markets could divide if different governing structures use different eligibility rules. Traditional rivalries crossing the new boundary could become harder to protect, and every national championship would face a legitimacy question. If one powerful group crowns its champion and another organization crowns a different champion, which one represents college football? Supporters of a formal split may argue that college sports already operates this way. The richest conferences already control most football revenue. They already command the largest television audiences. They already drive playoff negotiations and many national policy conversations. From that perspective, a formal separation would simply admit what the sport has become. But formalizing the split would still change the incentives. Today, a smaller program can at least exist inside the same national association and pursue a recognized championship path. A divided structure could turn financial gaps into permanent competitive boundaries. It could also place even more power in the hands of a small group of conference commissioners, media partners, university presidents, and legal advisors. That may produce faster decisions. It would not automatically produce fairer ones. So, how should this story be read right now? Not as an announcement, not as a countdown, and not as empty noise. The public evidence supports a serious warning. The Southeastern Conference is saying that its participation in the current national structure depends on whether that structure can deliver workable rules, credible enforcement, reasonable legal protection, and a postseason system the league considers fair. The conference has not shown the public a finished exit plan. It has shown the public that remaining is conditional. The next signals will be concrete. Watch the final shape of the Protect College Sports Act. Watch whether the Southeastern Conference and Big Ten support it after negotiations. Watch the next college football playoff format decision. Watch whether the 9-game schedule becomes a real competitive problem during the season. Watch future meetings of conference presidents. Most importantly, watch for the moment when discussion turns into infrastructure, a working group, a written governance proposal, a legal framework, a partnership agreement, a championship plan. Those would be signs that the conversation has moved from frustration toward preparation. Until then, the honest conclusion is more measured, but still enormous. The Southeastern Conference is not walking away from the NCAA today. It is putting the NCAA, Congress, and the rest of college football on notice that the current arrangement is no longer guaranteed forever. That matters because the largest changes in this sport rarely begin with a formal announcement. They begin when the people with the most power stop treating the existing structure as permanent. That is the work behind FootballRealm and the larger GameplanByDylon ecosystem. The goal is not to repeat the loudest headline. It is to organize the evidence, separate what is real from what is exaggerated, and explain what the football conversation could change next. In this case, the headline says the Southeastern Conference might leave. The deeper story is that college football's most powerful conference has publicly admitted that staying now comes with conditions.